Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Bobble Challenge, and if necessary, destroying media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, as we're recording this podcast, Benjamin Netanyahu has yet to launch his all-out air, land, and sea onslaught on Gaza. He's delayed and delayed. We don't know what the reasons are. I mean, ostensibly humanitarian reasons, but one never really ascribes humanitarianism to Benjamin Netanyahu. So we can speculate that Netanyahu, who's a pretty cautious person, does not want to provoke a massive war throughout the Middle East. He may also be, getting warnings from Washington, who also are afraid of what they've got themselves sucked into. We now have two aircraft carrier groups in the Eastern Mediterranean. For what purpose, it isn't clear.
It's a bit crowded in the East Mediterranean.
Yeah, exactly. Whom are they going to fire missiles at? I mean, Lebanon, Iran. It isn't clear. If I were a betting man, I think that Netanyahu, it's very hard for him now not to do something. I mean, he's raised expectations. He can't walk away. But I would speculate that it's going to be much, much less than we had been led to believe. And then he'll get there won't be quite such an outcry throughout the world. And he'll get credit for being restrained. But I may be wrong. I'm just speculating here.
Yeah, well, that might sell with some people, but the way Israeli public opinion has been conditioned, they don't want restraint. Okay, I mean, this is a bloodlust. I mean, and Blinken, wandering around the Middle East like a drunk, if he'd caught some fish, we would have heard about it. Okay, he came up zilch, everybody. Okay, I don't think he's taken very seriously, nor is he very much respected. Okay, so and then we had Biden in an interview saying that it was kind of interesting, George. I mean, there shouldn't be an occupation of Gaza. Well, he should have said reoccupation or a continued occupation.
Right.
You're a stickler for words here. But he said something, George, and because he's just a senile loser, you don't know if it means something or not. But he said there has to be a Palestinian Authority. Okay. Well, Mahmoud Abbas, yeah, he's still around, everybody. I know it's easy to forget about him for like 20 years. Okay.
Right.
He said, the PLO, haven't heard those three letters in a long time, is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Kind of interesting. I mean, is that why Blinken, fished Abbas out of a well just to have that photo op to talk about our authority, which is absolutely laughable and actually criminal, I think. So what, are they going to put Mahmoud Abbas on the back of a Israeli tank and bring him to Gaza City at the end of all of this? Right. I don't know.
No, I agree. I mean, it's a bit late in the day, and again, the United States tried that before. That was they did that way back when Hamas won their election. I think it was 2006. And then again, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, wanted to again marginalize Hamas. I mean, they've been doing that, of trying to assert that Abbas is the real representative of the Palestinian people. Well, he isn't. I mean, we've all these years, Hamas is clearly, the rules the roost in Gaza. I mean, obviously, what Israel wants to do is to push the Gazans out. I mean, I think that all of the threats, hey, you have to move south, is in order then to create such a humanitarian crisis in the south, such an overwhelming pressure on the exits out of Gaza, that Egypt will relent and let the population through into Sinai. Egypt obviously has no intention of doing so, and the residents of Gaza don't want to do so. But if the humanitarian crisis becomes so overwhelming, it will be hard to resist. I mean, that's obviously the Israeli plan, and clearly, the residents of Gaza are trying to resist. Egypt is trying to resist, because once you're out, you're out. You're not going back in. Israel then takes it over. So that's, again, I mean, obviously this is something Israel is now very anxious to pull off, because then they get, hey, if we can get rid of half the population, we've got rid of half of our problems. But I don't think that's going to work. So again, does Netanyahu really want to provoke an all-out war against Israel? He knows that there's got a real problem. He's had warnings now from Iran about that there's going to be an explosion through the Middle East. Hezbollah just isn't going to sit still. I mean, if the scenes of horror start multiplying, Hezbollah will attack Israel. Is that what Netanyahu is going to do? Because I don't think the United States wants to get involved. I mean, for all you've got the 2 aircraft carrier groups, the United States does not want to get involved itself. I mean, maybe it'll lob some missiles, but even that I'm not sure of. But it certainly doesn't want to send boots on the ground into Israel. It never has in the past. It doesn't want to do it now.
Yeah, and there's that talk. I don't know if it's just bluster. Navy SEALs going in and rescuing hostage. Right? It's just bluster. I don't. Right. I don't. If I were a Navy SEAL, I don't know if I'd sign up for that job. Okay. No. Really, this is not like in the deserts of Yemen and Iraq. Okay, this is one of the most densely populated places in the world. Okay, right. So. Yeah. I don't know, George. There's so many wild cards right now. Number one, obviously, Israel doesn't want to have multiple fronts against it. I mean, that would be dire for them. They want to avoid that. But this ground invasion, I don't know. I mean, I've been looking at so many different contrary reports. I mean, it's very complicated. George and I are not military people, but you're right. Pushing at least half the population into the south positions them to be given a final push out. There's no indication they really want to do that. The foreign people with the dual passport, dual citizenship and all that, yeah, obviously they probably want to leave, and they might. And as we're speaking right now, the crossing in the south is not open. It was supposed to be open apparently, but apparently that's all third-hand information. The main actors, Israel and Egypt, are saying no, that's not the case. And of course, all you have to do is ask the people of Gaza, is it open? Because it's not. Okay, but I don't know, George. This is extremely risky. I tend to think this is not going to work out as well as the Israelis hope for. Okay, because and I trust people like Norman Finkelstein. I trust people like Max Blumenthal. Both have been to Gaza many, many times. I've been to Israel. I've never been to Gaza. There's just, 2 generations of young people that just saying, if I'm going to, if it's the end days for me, I'm going to do it here. Okay. I'm not going to, like my grandparents and great grandparents, be shoved out to another place. And who in their right mind wants to reside in Sinai? Okay. There's nothing there. And the Egyptians don't want it too. I mean, George, remember what happened? You pushed the PLO into Lebanon. Didn't work out so well there, did it? Okay. Do you think Sisi wants the same thing again? And and plus, let's be fair, everybody. It's kind of cynical, but that's the way things are. It's all about the bazaar. I mean, maybe Sisi would be interested in it, but here's my bank account, here's my SWIFT number. I mean, are you going to pay for it? Because I can't.
Yeah, you can't. We're talking about such a huge sum of money, and then what's the Egyptian population's response to it? I mean, you can't just shove 1 million people in and expect them, oh, great, well, that's fine, no problem there, because Egypt is not a wealthy country, and if they're going to have to start,
they're broke.
Exactly. If they're going to start looking after 1 million people, I mean, it's way beyond Egypt's resources. And again, as we were discussing with Morandi the other day, it'll be badly discredit Egypt in the eyes of the Arab world if it's essentially becoming a participant in ethnic cleansing. And so there's nothing in it for Sisi. Why for him to do this? So then the question is then if Netanyahu then goes in, what are the consequences? Because we don't exactly know. Hamas has been preparing for this for some time. They're not just sitting there on their hands. So therefore, they may well have all kinds of surprises for the Israeli forces. I was reading the other day about Ronald Reagan's ridiculous Lebanon venture, because when was the last time the Americans were kind of involved in Lebanon? That was a total fiasco. And
at least he learned from it, though. He learned. I give him credit for
he got out. He got out. He got sucked in. He didn't want to get sucked in. He was sucked in by awful people around him. He had terrible people around him, just as Trump did, like Alexander Haig, who kind of pushed him into it. He didn't really want to get involved. But once they were in, then they were immediately, sucked into trying to support the government of at the time, this Maronite Christian government of Amin Jamal. Again, Reagan didn't want to do it. And of course, then American forces became targets of Hezbollah, of Syria, Iran, and so on. And he got out. But in the meantime, while he was there, they were shelling. You remember they were actually shelling Lebanon. It's one of these mysterious things. People wonder, why are Americans shelling Lebanon? I mean, what's in Lebanon that America needs to start shelling? But as you say, he got out. So I don't know what Biden is thinking. He wants to get back in 40 years later.
What's really strange is you've come across the same reports I have, is that the Biden administration, they don't want their diplomats to talk about de-escalation and things like that, these terms. That's spooky, George. That's really, I mean, are they so cocksure about the outcome that they want that they're willing to forego this? Okay. Right. Now, look, you can always have negotiations, engagement on different levels, and still have a military plan. They're not mutually exclusive, but they're making it mutually exclusive this time. I find that to be extremely reckless. Okay, really reckless. Okay, right. Because the first shots have already been fired, obviously, and that should tell us all that the outcome. There could be many different outcomes, and maybe many of those outcomes are not ones that you want. And will it solve the problem that you claim to want to alleviate? Okay, the total destruction of Hamas, that's a tall order, okay? I mean, does that mean occupying? I mean, does Israel really want to occupy a place that will look like Stalingrad?
Right. No, right.
And on top of it, at this point in time, I see, how many months would it take actually to move all those people in an orderly fashion? It would take a huge amount of time. So what is Israel going to do? Feed these people? Is it going to turn on the electricity? Is it going to send in aid? Okay, I don't think Israeli public opinion would be for that. Okay. I mean, Netanyahu's got himself into a real quagmire, and it's been before the land invasion starts.
You're absolutely right. An occupation would be very casualty rich for Israel. And Israel is very casualty averse. It always has been. It's not, they're not people who like Russians and Ukrainians. I mean, they go in and they fight. Israel has never done that. Israel is very, very cautious. Not unlike the Americans. They like to bomb, send missiles. They don't like to send in their ground forces. Very, very, which is because you lose so many lives. So that's why I'm somewhat skeptical that really Netanyahu is going to go in there and soon there will be thousands of casualties, Israeli casualties. My feeling is still that he will do it, but it'll be a much, much smaller operation than he's led us to believe. And then he'll just call it off after a few days. He's not going to destroy Hamas. It's just ludicrous to start talking about, well, we're going to destroy Hamas. I mean, like Nikki Haley, finish them. How are you going to do that? I mean, this is a very powerful and clever organization.
Yeah, Nikki, what are you going to do? Arrive in Gaza City and start hitting people with your bag? Oh, come on. And Tucker Carlson was right. She talks like a child. Yes, okay. That's right. George is right in the sense that, and I stole this from all the reports I've been reading today. I don't remember who exactly said it, so I'm not saying it's my idea. But urban warfare is the great equalizer. George is right. The U.S. can bomb and missile this and all that, okay? But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, you can have a Kalashnikov and be barefoot, and you can fight the Israelis in an urban environment, particularly if it's destroyed like Stalingrad. It's the great equalizer. All of your gimmickry is not going to help you, and the Israelis obviously know that.
Exactly. And remember, again, if you go back to the Lebanon War of 1982, when the goal was to drive out the PLO, remember what the Israelis did. They didn't actually send in their infantry. They bombed and bombed and bombed and bombed, West Beirut, where the PLO was based, until the PLO leaders made the decision to leave. But they didn't go in and fight the, mano on mano of the PLO. That's just not the way the Israelis operate. So that's why I'm just a bit surprised that, they're going to go in and, a lot of commentary in the West, just they live in a fantasy world. Somehow it's always 1967. It's always 6-Day War. Moshe Dayan, sails into East Jerusalem.
Tanks moving,
That's it, exactly. Tanks moving. That's it.
Tanks are going to be no use.
Yeah, and since then, which is now 55 years ago, since then, Israel hasn't had any military successes. That was it. That was just a one-off. Since then, they've always been very grim because, the Palestinians and Arabs in general have learned how to fight against Israel. They know about Israel's weaknesses, and they've exploited Israel's weaknesses. So the whole idea that you're just going to go in and we're going to crush Hamas. How? What is the mechanism?
It feels good saying it, doesn't it, George? It feels great saying it, okay? But this is the fourth major conflict. And, after every single time, they have more Hamas, not less.
Right.
Okay. Right. And they have to be aware of that as well. The problem is that they've just made Netanyahu and the leadership there have just made a commitment that you can't walk away from now. I mean, you've got to go in. George, I tend to agree with George. To what degree will they go in? But if you're playing a percentage game, then your percentages percentage for getting your ultimate goal is less. Okay, so that's the big question and the quandary that they've created for themselves. George is right. When you have like 50% unemployment and someone says to you, hey, I'm going to teach you how to make a bomb. Okay, I'll do it. Okay. If you have nothing else to do, I'm being serious right now. Why don't you just join the resistance? Hey, you're a big guy. Can you dig tunnels for us? Sure. I got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a fascinating case of this resistance, this Arab resistance that has gone on for such a long time. They've absolutely not succumbed to Israel. I mean, and then ultimately you have to say the whole Zionist project has been a failure. I mean, it's a total failure. You've failed to persuade your neighbors to accept you after all this time, 100 years, and they still hate you. And they're still, as you say, young men, they grow up. What do? Hey, let's see how we can work on a missile. How do we build a drone? How do we build a bomb? How do we dig tunnels? That's it. It's like, so, if you're a Jew and you think, well, I want to live in safety, well, you're not going to go to Israel. That's the least safe place in the world to live. And that should have been that would be the measure of the success of Zionism. That here's a place, one place in the world where Jews are safe. No, this is the place in the world that Jews are least safe.
Yeah, and this war has interrupted some of the major dividing points within Israeli society, because and you and I have watched it, and it's been very rapid, the rise of these extreme right-wing groups, fanatical groups, and now they have fanatical ministers. Okay, now with the war, they've been able to come up with a coalition to see through whatever they're going to go through, but that's not going to paper over however they define victory, and they always will define it the way they want to, but it's not going to put to a stop the huge divisions that are developing in Israel. This fanaticism that some of these people have. I mean, it's never reported, very rarely reported, about these fanatical settlers in the West Bank.
Right.
I mean, Israeli, the Israeli army only killed 50 kids last year. Yeah, but settlers kill a lot more. Okay. But because they're settlers, they don't make the grade, they don't make the news. Okay.
Yes.
But and we see this all the time, and we have to also to throw in the mix, which we haven't mentioned but we've implied, is that there could be a third intifada.
Exactly.
Depending on the circumstances. Okay.
That's right. That's right. It's very interesting that I looked the other day at that debate between Norman Finkelstein and Alan Dershowitz. And Dershowitz, this was because it was a review of Dershowitz's book, The Case for Israel. And Dershowitz blandly, of course, first of all says, Israel, this model democracy, model this and all, it pays fantastic, attention to human rights and not to, commit torture or anything else. And as well, I think Israel made a mistake in not coming to a settlement in 1967. I think the settlements were a mistake, building settlements in the. Well, if that's a mistake, you regard that as a mistake, how can you say there's a case to be made for Israel? I mean, this is the most fundamental. So it's a fundamental violation of not just UN Security Council resolution, but of all the Geneva Conventions. So how can you make a case for Israel if your position, and that's what Dershowitz says, his position, I'm against the settlements. Then and this is the kind of absolute ridiculous nonsense. Well, I'm against the settlements, but I love Israel.
No, this is as if George is saying as we speak in 2023, in 1861, I would have been against slavery.
Yeah.
Well, good on you, George.
Yes. No, that's right. Yeah.
It means nothing. I mean, again, with the quandary that Netanyahu and his cabal face it's in the United States too, because of how people are cowed into taking a position that they know almost nothing about. Okay, Israel doesn't commit war crimes. The very existence of Gaza is a war crime, and then we can work backwards from there, everyone.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, just say, it's just, limited violations and all. No, it's so humongous. I mean, these people are talking about trees. No, I'm talking about the whole forest.
That's right. No, that's right. But of course, that's a very cute argument. What people like Dershowitz say, Israel doesn't commit torture. So then that puts somebody like Finkelstein to say, well, what about this and this? Here's the Human Rights Watch report. Here's an Amnesty International report. Yeah, but that, well, first of all, I don't believe those stories. But in any case, that isn't really torture. Oh, I see. So sleep deprivation, forcing people to stand for hours on end. Oh, that isn't torture. Well, of course, if you just denied it, well, that's not really torture. Being shaken or slapped her on the head, well, that isn't really torture. Well, okay, you can just go, Israel does not commit torture. And that's what, so in other words, it forces people like Finkelstein to come up with fact after fact after fact. And then Joshua said, no, that doesn't count as torture. No, that isn't really torture.
Well, also, Israel doesn't commit torture. Well, it has its prison guards do it for them. Okay. I mean, again, people forget, when young Palestinian boys are rounded up, it's not always the IDF that's doing that. It's the PA, Palestinian Authority, that does it for them very often. Okay. And snitches on people and all kinds of things like that. So, I mean, but one of the things that just amazes me, George, and I'm sure it does you too, is that this huge myth that is such a lie, it perpetuates itself in the minds of Western leaders. It's very interesting, just as an aside here, George has already mentioned it, and it's really worth repeating. With these waves of Muslim immigrants into the Western world, particularly in Europe, and then when the issue like this comes up, look at the streets of Paris.
Yeah.
Woo! Look at that.
Yeah.
I never saw one of those for Ukraine, George.
No. That's the thing, and that's why this Israel issue really cuts both ways in the way Ukraine and Russia doesn't, because yeah, there are all the Zionists, the Jews who feel very emotional towards Israel. You have the political elites feel very emotional about Israel. Yeah, but what about the Muslims? Massive Muslim population now in Europe, in France, in Italy, in Germany, in the UK. They are very emotional. They are very emotionally vested in this issue. And
but it's interesting, George. You're absolutely right, because what other issues are they allowed to integrate themselves into? First of all, a lot of them don't want to be integrated. They maybe prefer Sharia law, all these other kind of things. That's why multiculturalism in Europe has been an utter catastrophe. Okay, what does it mean to assimilate? Should you force people to assimilate, incentivize people? They never resolved any of these issues. But there's one thing that that's their issue. It's Palestine. Okay. I mean, it's so simple. What you think they should have the capital gains tax and ask these communities what is that? Okay, right, all right. I know. Do you think we should spend more money on the space program? I don't know. What about Palestine? Yeah, they have an opinion about it. Okay,
that's right. Yeah, exactly. And this is something that they think that somehow what the Palestinians have to endure, they have to endure. That they themselves endure. Muslims, they feel themselves oppressed, bullied, discriminated against in Europe, and said that what we endure is just a fraction of what the Palestinians endure. They are emotionally attached to the Palestinians, just like so many American Jews are emotionally attached to Israel. And that's where you've got a real problem here. Whereas Russia and Ukraine, really, there aren't that many Russians and Ukrainians, in the West. Therefore, for most of the West, they don't have a dog in this fight. I mean, as long as they're not getting killed, they just don't care that much. But here, this is very different, and it's a much more explosive situation, and something again Netanyahu has to take into consideration, because if suddenly terrorism is unleashed in Europe, people are going to say, "Hey, this is because of Israel. We are suffering terrorism because of you."
And the unelected Queen Ursula coming out, in step with Netanyahu. Well, for someone that's unelected, she should be more careful and leveled with her words. Okay, because this is an obvious affront to people that feel that there is such a democracy deficit in Europe, and there is. And now you have the queen of the whole operation, unelected royalty like herself, saying what Europe thinks. The audacity of that. It's just, this wouldn't have never happened 20 years ago, George.
I agree. I think it's absolutely outrageous that she has been allowed to get away with this, that she somehow parades around as if she's somehow the president of the EU. She's not the president of anything. She's a bureaucrat. She's an unelected bureaucrat. That's what she heads a bureaucracy called the European Commission. And yet she goes around and says, "Oh, well, I'm the president of the EU. I speak on behalf of the EU." You don't speak on behalf of anyone. And yet she's been allowed to do this. Like she gets invited to all these, whether it's the G7 or the G20, and every forum, she's always there. So, well, she's representing the EU. And she represents absolutely nobody. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, it was profoundly offensive when she said, "Oh, the EU stands with Israel," and you're like, "No, we never elected you. We never decided that we're going to stand with Israel."
Well, and also, I mean, and the EU is not going in a very positive direction right now. This is just insult to injury. Okay, now that you want to mandate the size of a beer glass all across the block. Okay, I guess that's okay. But then something as visceral as this, it just really diminishes and delegitimizes the EU. And I knew this was going to happen. I mean, just go to Paris, everyone. I stayed in the Syrian district. I wonder why they call it the Syrian district. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, it was always a very short-sighted policy, and plenty of people warned this is very, very short-sighted, and you are going to pay a heavy price down the road. But good liberal opinions said, "Oh, no, we this is good. Multiculturalism is good. Multiracialism is good. We have all the different diversity, all these different people coming together." Well, they all come together, and it just suddenly explodes when there's a fundamental disagreement, and it was obvious it was going to happen. And, Macron can say, oh, we're going to ban this or we're going to ban that. Well, how are you going to ban hundreds of thousands of people going out on the street? I mean, you're going to really, use your rubber truncheon. You're going to use your rubber bullets against
For
people.
Israel?
Yeah, for Israel, exactly. Yeah. So it's absolute disaster. And again, this was obvious. This was kind of, again, the neoliberal European project. This is what we've come to.
They just don't think things through.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap it up here. I mean, unfortunately, everyone, there's going to be a whole lot more death ahead of us in this conflict, and it's really, it personally bothers me. I feel compelled to keep up with what's going on because I've been able to watch in real time the bombing of innocent people. It's really weird. I don't know. I can't really get my head around that. I mean, how can I, as a person, be watching a screen where buildings and neighborhoods are being blown up and nobody's doing anything to stop it? It really is. It's almost Orwellian to me. I mean, how you can be a witness to a war crime and feel so powerless to stop it. It's a very uneasy feeling watching this happen, because people do have choices. Israel has choices. Okay, no one is being forced to do these things, but they feel compelled and they feel that they have impunity to do it. And as George and I have outlined in our podcast today, they should tread very carefully, because things can easily go wrong.
Yeah, no question. This is the Middle East of today, not the Middle East of 67 and 73. There was a time when Israel could have dealt with very reasonable people. I mean, it's you're dealing with very different people now. Were very powerful, and they really hate Israel. So it's
One thing I want to point out before we leave, George, I think it's really important. Addressing the conspiracy theory that Russia was behind this and was supporting Hamas. Russia does not support Hamas. Russia doesn't have a close relationship. Yes, they will speak to them, but they do not have a close relationship. Hamas did not support the Syrian people, which a lot of people in the region were very upset about. So the Russians have kept Hamas at arm's length at very best. Okay, so there is and if you look at official pronouncements here, Hamas has not given any kind of special treatment whatsoever. Okay, atrocity when Hamas commits atrocities, the Russian side says it point blank, and it has no problem doing that.
No, I think that's right. I think what Russia has supported has been the two-state solution, and while Russia has not been particularly warm in its expressions of solicitude for Israel, or it didn't offer all the warm words of von der Leyen. I mean, there is also the issue that Russia feels that you've kind of haven't done anything for peace
in a long
decades.
time.
I mean, when was the last time there was a peace initiative? When was the last time people sat down across in the table to sort things out? I mean, and said, well, there's supposed to be a peace process. There's supposed to be a two-state solution. There's supposed to be the quartet, which comprises the EU, UN, the US, and Russia. That hasn't met in I don't know how long. I mean, you say, well, yeah. I mean, if you have a pressure cooker and you turn up the heat, it's going to explode. I mean, it's assured, it's scientific predictability that it's going to explode. So the idea where you can just, flap your arms around and say, oh, Israel, Israel, Israel. I mean, it's just stupid. You got to sort of think seriously about, well, how do we move forward?
When and during the interview, I guess it was with CBS that Biden did, he said there has to be a two-state solution. I almost fell out of my chair. I mean, the U.S. gave up on that a long time ago. It's almost a cruel joke to say the United States supports a two-state. Since when?
Yeah,
okay. I mean, that was Oslo. After that, it was just a moot point.
No, that's exactly it. But that's what the U.S. always does. The U.S. official position, two-state solution. It's like the official position is we're against the settlements. That's the official position. The official position, still UN Security Council Resolution 242. I mean, US hasn't disowned that. I mean, that's the official position, but in practical terms, I mean, it doesn't even minimum. It doesn't do the minimum to uphold any of these UN.
It's like Secretary Mayorkas say, "Oh, the border is secure."
That's right, exactly. Yeah, that's right. The border's secure. That's it. And then the hacks repeat it. Yeah, the border's secure. It's all these right wingers. It's all people like Tucker Carlson who are lying about the border.
All right, everyone. Obviously, this is our latest update of what's going on. George and I are kind of steeped in this our entire life, so obviously it is very interesting. But that interest is also what is added with that the interest is a lot of tragedy. We're going to see a lot of tragedy moving forward, okay? And nobody knows how this is going to end. All right, this is a Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Do visit our store for once in a while. And George has his live stream this time tomorrow, right, Benny?
Live stream, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, and before you head out for a well-deserved scotch or bourbon or tequila, which is Buddy's favorite, see what's going on in your pocket. If you have some bob clinking around, whip it out, dunk them in his tip jar.
His tip jar is so empty he thinks my ear is a tip jar.
Exactly. He's saying, I'm tired of sticking my mug into the tip jar. I'm going to stick my mug into him. We want him coveting his tip jar again. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology, and above all, you can just get Buddy to calm down a little bit. He's getting very agitated these days. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.